Do you catch yourself reacting in ways that push others away, but then you feel guilty and confused? Or were you ever called a narcissist and wondered, what does that really mean? If any of this sounds familiar, you're not alone, and that's exactly why I created Office Hours with Dr. Anthony Mazzella. That's me. Office Hours is a low-cost, small group space where you could bring your questions about these thoughts and experiences. Together, we'll work through confusion and help you build healthier relational patterns. Basically, this is a space designed for anyone looking for clarity, insight, and support. If that sounds like you, just click the link in the show notes below to join us for our next meeting. Okay, I hope to see you there. Hello everyone, welcome to the Narcissism Decoder. I'm your host, Dr. Anthony Mazzella. In today's episode, we're going to explore a phenomenon that may seem straightforward on the surface, but actually reveals a complex and profound inner experience, the emotional experience of emptiness and the struggle with uncertainty that often lies beneath it. Many people who exhibit narcissistic characteristics, especially those with vulnerable or covert narcissistic presentations, often report a profound and persistent sense of internal emptiness. To give you a sense of what this feels like, here are a few ways people have described it. And I'm quoting, "I feel so empty, like I look in the mirror and nothing is there." Or, "I literally feel like a cave, nothing inside. I can feel it in my stomach." Or you may have heard a version of this from people who have been hurt. They tend to say things like, and again I'm quoting, "They are just emotional vampires sucking the life out of everyone because they're empty inside. There's nothing there." And I unquote. Many of these individuals feel disconnected not only from others, but from themselves, as if their own inner life is lacking meaning or purpose. So, what does this emptiness actually signify? There are several ways to understand this painful emotional state. One explanation points to a lack of an integrated inner core, meaning their sense of self is fragile or underdeveloped. Their self-worth often depends heavily on external validation, so they may perpetually seek attention, admiration, validation, or approval to feel what? To feel whole. From a psychodynamic perspective, this sense of emptiness reflects a deeper inner struggle. At its core, there may be a true self that was never fully integrated or has been lost beneath layers of defensive structures. And don't worry, I'll describe what that means in a moment. In its place is a false self. That's what begins to emerge. A fragile facade that constantly risks collapse if it isn't reinforced by that external validation that I just mentioned. The emptiness itself can feel like a gaping hole, not just emotionally, but experientially and existentially. To cope with this void, narcissistic behaviors, such as the grandiose sense of self, that's the omnipotence and the grandiosity, manipulation, or emotional volatility, often develop a compensatory approach. In other words, what I'm trying to say is, these are all attempts to fill or distract from the inner emptiness. Yet, it's important to remember that these individuals aren't simply empty shells. This isn't just emotional nothingness. It's far more complex. The emptiness often functions as an adaptive, defensive structure, a kind of psychic armor that shields a fragile core from feelings of failure, humiliation, or perhaps disillusion. I want to invite you to see this condition from a different perspective, not as a hollow facade, but as a multi-layered psychic structure built to survive. In other words, this is adaptive. To make this more concrete, let's look at a prototypical case. A woman trying to understand why even everyday tasks leave her feeling overwhelmed and then subsequently empty. Maybe this is something you yourself have thought about. Have you ever noticed how even the simplest errands of life, like going shopping, finding a parking spot, making a phone call, or running a small task, can feel utterly overwhelming? For some people, these everyday activities stir up enormous pressure. What if I crash the car again? What if there's no parking spot? What if I fail at something so ordinary? Suddenly, what should be a minor inconvenience, that's the chores or task of everyday life, become heavy emotional burdens. A woman once described that when she is with her kids, she just wants to sit, to do nothing. Not rest in the usual sense, not relaxation after a long day, but a state of emptiness. She feels herself pulled toward stillness, toward nothingness, as if shutting down is safer than engaging. Her words were simple, yet they carried the weight of a whole inner world, and I quote, "I just want to sit. I don't want to do anything. I just want to zone out and not experience anything," she said. This is more than fatigue. It's the experience of emptiness, a wish to withdraw into a blank space where demands disappear. For her, doing nothing is not laziness. It's a psychic retreat, a way of protecting herself from the intensity of life and the pressure of connecting and responsibility. So, if we take what she's saying about shopping, parking, and the possibility of crashing the car, these are all busy, overstimulating, risk-laden situations. They're full of pressure, choice, and potential failure. In contrast, and I quote, emptiness and doing nothing, I quote that as well, her words, offer her a defensive retreat, a blank space, stripped of what? Stripped of demands, stimulation, and most importantly, risk. As I was exploring her wish to do nothing, she mentioned, and I quote again, "I wish I didn't have to live with uncertainty." What does this mean? I wondered. And what I slowly begin to realize is that beneath the emptiness lies something deeper, an unbearable struggle with uncertainty. For many with narcissistic dynamics, uncertainty is not just uncomfortable, it's intolerable. It evokes the helplessness of childhood, when uncertainty was linked to rejection, absence, or even danger. The inner logic of a child goes something like this. Will my mother show up? Will she be there for me to pick me up on time after school? Will she wake up in the morning to help me get ready for school? Or will I be left alone again? Will she even be home? And by the way, this isn't just the inner logic. These are the thoughts that I begin to hear when this uncertainty is explored. Emptiness, then, can be understood as one way of defending against uncertainty. If you withdraw into blankness, if you feel nothing, then you no longer have to endure the waiting, the risk, the possibility of failure or rejection. What if she's not even home when I wake up? But of course, this comes at a cost. Emptiness protects against uncertainty, but it also strips away vitality. What I am encouraging you to think about is how emptiness and uncertainty are deeply intertwined. Emptiness, at times, functions as a retreat, a way of shutting down so the unpredictability of life cannot intrude. But the wish to escape uncertainty altogether runs even deeper. It's not simply about wanting calm. It's about longing for a world where danger can be eliminated entirely. That's why, after listening closely and helping her understand the link between her emptiness and the dread of uncertainty, I observed that avoiding uncertainty would mean not living in the real world. That was an empathic confrontation that I made. I confronted the impossibility of the wish, but without shaming it. Her quick agreement and deepening thoughts on my comment revealed both awareness and a longing. She understood that uncertainty can't be avoided, yet she still longed for and spoke about a world without it. Emptiness and uncertainty are two sides of the same coin. When the world feels unpredictable, when outcomes can't be guaranteed, emptiness offers an escape. By shutting down into, and again I quote, nothingness, there are no choices to make, no risk to take, no possibility of rejection or failure. It's a way of saying, if I don't engage, then nothing bad can happen. That's why the wish to eliminate uncertainty is so powerful. It's not simply about wanting peace of mind. It's about avoiding the intolerable feelings of being small, unprotected, or at the mercy of others. For this patient that I'm describing, emptiness is more than fatigue. It's the very strategy that keeps uncertainty at bay. From a psychodynamic perspective, this is the inner logic that organizes her withdrawal. Doing nothing becomes a refuge. Nothingness serves as protection against overwhelming demands. The kid's needs, traffic, parking, making phone calls, running errands. Faced with these pressures, she collapses into emptiness, a psychic numbing that shields her from anxiety about crashing, failing, or proving inadequate. In this way, retreating into emptiness also helps her avoid frustration and failure. The busyness of life stirs up fears of error or harm, but the logic goes, if I don't do, then I can't fail. Even ordinary frustrations, like not finding a parking spot, are not just inconveniences, but can feel like narcissistic injuries. And you may have heard me speak about this in earlier episodes. That just means exposing her to feelings of smallness, powerlessness, or incompetence. Emptiness becomes the defense against these painful feelings. And in motherhood, the same dynamics resurface, we came to discover. We spoke about how, when she's with her children, being needed, being watched, being responsible stirs up fears of what? Fears of failing or not being good enough. Once again, emptiness functions as the retreat, protecting her from those feelings by disengaging instead of risking frustration and humiliation. So, if we understand emptiness as both a defense against uncertainty and a refuge from the risk of failure, the next question becomes, how do we speak to it in the room? How do we approach this experience in a way that honors its protective function, that's the adaptive piece, without reinforcing the retreat itself?
Let's take a quick break.
Are you tired of feeling like you're walking on eggshells all the time? Do you feel drained, confused, or like nothing you do is ever good enough? Are you stuck in a cycle of elation, then criticism and confusion? If any of this sounds familiar, you're not alone. And that's exactly why I created Office Hours with Dr. Anthony Mazzella. That's me. Office Hours is a low-cost, small group space where you could bring your questions about narcissistic traits and dynamics and the places where you feel stuck. You'll be met with honest, grounded feedback. I'll hold the group with structure, but there's also space for a real conversation. This is a space designed for anyone looking for clarity, insight, and support. If that sounds like you, just click the link in the show notes to join us. Okay, I hope to see you there. That's where I might begin to put words to her experience, to name what emptiness is doing for her, while also gently opening up the possibility of something more. I might say something like, "It sounds like the idea of emptiness really resonates with you, almost like it's a way to step out of the busyness, all the pressure of things like the errands, driving, finding a parking spot, even taking care of the kids." And depending on her reaction, remember, we always have to gauge how these things land. I may wonder if doing nothing is a way of protecting herself. I may ask her that. I wonder if doing nothing, again, using her words, but then I add, is a way of protecting yourself, keeping yourself safe. What comes to mind about that? The goal of this line of intervention is to learn more about the emptiness and see it as a way to protect herself from the stress or fear that something could go wrong. What I'm trying to capture, and I hope you're beginning to hear, that initially I help her recognize and begin to think about the emptiness and its link to uncertainty. So the first step is naming this. Giving words to the experience of emptiness helps the person recognize that doing nothing is not just laziness, but it's a meaningful retreat. Meaningful meaning it has meaning. And that's something we need to be curious about. So from there, we can begin to ask, does emptiness feel like relief? See, we're inquiring about it, getting closer to it. Does it feel like shutting down? By exploring the nuances of emptiness, therapy opens the possibility of finding new ways to cope with pressure, ways that don't involve numbing out, but rather allow for a fuller, more enlivened engagement with life. We've been talking about emptiness as a defense against uncertainty, a way of stepping out of the risk of life. But there's another layer to notice here. What's interesting is that when we give a name to emptiness as her need to shut down into nothingness because of a fear of uncertainty and therefore vulnerability, she begins to experience a sense of relief. How do I know that? I notice this sense of relief in what follows. You see, you never know how an intervention is going to land. You only know by what follows, because someone can just agree with you, but that doesn't mean that they're not taking it in. Or someone can say that's the most brilliant thing I've ever heard, and nothing changes. But what I noticed was a sense of relief in what followed this line of discussion when she returned to session, reporting that, and again I quote, "I've been feeling more present lately, and I realize that right now there's nothing to worry about," unquote. What makes this work hopeful is that when the defenses of anxiety and emptiness soften, even just a little, something else begins to show through, if you can allow yourself to see this. It's small, so you have to pay close attention. Small signs of vitality, moments of agency, glimpses of desire, they can all emerge once the mind is no longer fully occupied with the anxiety around the task and responsibilities of everyday living. That's precisely the moment to lean in, and I would say for me in my field, to lean in clinically in session. So again, I might say something along these lines. I wonder what it's like right now, with nothing to worry about. You see, this is an invitation to talk about and imagine a life energized not by defensive nothingness, emptiness, or hypervigilance, but by curiosity, desire, and authentic engagement. And when we look closely, we can see that her capacity for enjoyment and engagement is still there. It's just been overshadowed by emptiness and anxiety. She notices and spontaneously begins to share that small things actually feel good, like checking off a task on the to-do list or picking out something new for the kids to eat. These little moments carry meaning. They give her a sense of agency, competence, and satisfaction. Psychodynamically, this is important. It tells us her ability to find gratification hasn't disappeared. It's just been hiding. So in other words, she is not just an empty vessel. As her perspective shifts, so does her inner narrative. Before, her stories were dominated by global meaninglessness and emptiness. Now, moments of enjoyment and satisfaction are starting to break through. She's beginning to register that agency and care can feel good, even if those moments are fleeting, and they always are at the beginning. That's why you want to pull them to the fore, or you allow yourself to really dwell and think about them if you can. This marks a subtle but important recalibration of her inner logic. Her mind is no longer reasoning only in terms of, I need a break, so I withdraw. You see how simple that is? You see the dichotomy? Life is easy when you could just withdraw. It's also beginning to weave in, this new inner logic is also beginning to weave in, sometimes I withdraw, but sometimes I enjoy. I make choices, and I feel good checking things off on my to-do list. That recognition makes life feel less like an empty void and more like a mix, a place where moments of meaning coexist with the need to retreat. See, it's not like the need to retreat just disappears. By reflecting these moments back to her, that's pulling it to the fore, what I mentioned earlier. I can help her notice and integrate these different states and feelings. Over time, the defensive retreat into emptiness gives way to selective, intentional engagement, where life holds micro moments of meaning, micro moments, even amid the ongoing challenges of life. This is what we call integration. And again, if you're new to this podcast, please go back. You'll hear me speak quite frequently and extensively about one of the major goals of healing narcissism is integration. And this is integration. And integration, when thinking about healing narcissism, is the slow stitching together of split off parts of the self. That's it in a nutshell. But again, please go back and listen to any earlier episodes where I go into it more. So just to flush it out just a little bit more, integration means the false self no longer has to monopolize experience because the authentic self has begun to find a voice. Integration is what allows contradictory states, strength and weakness, emptiness and aliveness, withdrawal and participation to coexist without collapsing. So when we talk about emptiness in narcissism, we're not just describing a hollow shell. I want to emphasize that. I have tried now, over the course of like the last 20 minutes, to demonstrate how we are also looking at a way of coping with uncertainty and the fear of failure. What's hopeful is that even within that emptiness, when treated correctly, sparks of vitality, small moments of choice and satisfaction begin to emerge. There's still so much more to say about this, but we have to stop here for now. If this spoke to you and you're curious to learn more about all issues related to narcissism, please support the show by subscribing so you don't miss what's coming next. And even more importantly, take a moment to leave a review. Reviews make the podcast easier for others to find, which helps the show grow. The more the show grows, the more I can invest in creating thoughtful content that supports you in understanding and navigating your experiences with narcissism. Okay, thanks for being here with me. I'm grateful we got to explore this one together. Until next time, take care of yourself. Bye for now. Disclaimer alert. The Narcissism Decoder podcast is provided for general information purposes only. The content presented in this podcast is not intended to diagnose, treat, or cure any psychological condition related to narcissism. The content on this podcast should not be considered a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. for specific advice pertaining to narcissism or any other psychological condition, you could reach me directly. I am an experienced mental health practitioner who is always taking on new patients. If you would just like a consultation, I can do that too.